there's this moment where the moderator asks, like, he starts going on through all these statistics about different institutions that are that have like really low approval ratings, and he asked this question about whether the media deserves its low approval rating, and I think that in this clip, I mean, I think the difference between how Ben answers that question and how you answer it is really interesting.
So this low media rank, is that fair, or is that being manufactured as part of a culture war?
It's fair. I mean, it's entirely fair. I mean, I think that one of the things that we've seen for both good and bad, the fragmentation of media is a result of systemic distrust in the media, and that's existed for a very long time. I mean, that's nothing new. And I think that it's completely fair for people to look at the media. I know there are people on the left who think that the media is too right-wing, right? Obviously, we on the right think that the media is far too left-wing. But I think that sort of distrust in media sources is very often justified. I think that we're requiring more of people than we used to in the past, because once people have realized that there's an inherently political angle to how people cover the news, now we're asking them, if you want a full rounded diet, you actually have to choose it yourself, right? You have to cultivate yourself to watch the Young Turks and then watch my show and decide who you agree with, and where there's sort of a common locus of fact. That's the fact and everything else is the opinion. That's asking a lot of viewers where we didn't used to ask very much of viewers at all, right? You just turn on the evening news and buy whatever Walter Cronkite is saying, whether it's true or not. I think most Americans waking up to that is a good thing. The systemic lack of trust in media has some bad downstream effects sometimes, because when there are no gatekeepers, there are no gatekeepers. So I like the fact that there are no gatekeepers, because I think the gatekeepers were very often biased, but without gatekeepers, sometimes bad stuff gets through.
Yeah, I mean, I think that right now we're experiencing people existing in various filter bubbles. So if you are, for instance, consuming most of your news online, if you like a particular brand of programming, if you, let's say, lean more conservative and you're watching mostly conservative news, algorithms offer up more and more conservative news. And so when you get if you have preconceived notions and all of a sudden you're hearing or reading something that challenges those preconceived notions, you're gonna have a negative reaction to it. And you see that playing out across the board. I'll give you an example. I mean, I have family members who are constantly consuming news online. My mom's a good example, right? You'd be surprised she's my mom, because she's on Facebook. She clicked on a link to, let's say, the Daily Wire, perfect example. Well, Facebook is going to be offering up more Daily Wire type content. And then all of a sudden, when she's watching the Young Turks, she'll be like, well, I read on Facebook, or I read on the Daily Wire, whatever, that X, Y, and Z happened, and you're wrong, right? That conversation doesn't actually happen that often. But I'm giving you an example.
I was hopeful there for a second.
Right? And so look, there are all sorts of issues with the media, right? I mean, the media for the longest time completely ignored the very real frustrations that workers have been feeling in this country. I mean, the Federal Reserve released data indicating that nearly half of Americans can't even afford a $400 emergency. At the same time, you tune into CNN, CNBC, MSNBC. I mean, it doesn't matter, across the board. And they're like, the economy is doing great. We're seeing record growth. And what they're specifically talking about is the stock market. But the stock market is disconnected from the reality that the majority of workers are experiencing. So I think that type of stuff leads to people feeling, distrustful toward the press. At the same time, they exist in these filter bubbles and have their preconceived notions. It's hard to challenge that. So there's a lot of different things happening at the same time. I don't blame people for not being so trusting of the media. One other thing that I'll note is that the incentives are always in the wrong place. The kind of stories that I want to talk about on the Young Turks and do talk about on the Young Turks get no attention. They don't do well in terms of the number of views. I want to talk about international news. I want to talk about what's happening in Brazil. I want to talk about what's happening in Ecuador. It'll get like maybe 40,000 views at most. You know what gets a lot of views? I don't know. Anna Kasparian destroys this person. Or here's the latest cat fight. Like, I hate it. It's garbage. It's garbage.
I do hate it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I love that. I mean, that just feels real and right at the end, but also like just taking a step back. Okay, Ben's explanation of the media stuff is that, you know, people are reacting to, you know, liberal bias, you know, in the media. And he even says, well, this isn't new. It's like, okay, well, if that's not new, then why is it having this effect now, right? I mean, like, yeah, because clearly, you know, like, I mean, whatever, William F. Buckley was like saying all that stuff in like 1960, whatever, you know, so like that wasn't stopping anybody from watching Walter Cronkite. Like what, you know, what changed? And to him, because it's all just about like sort of like, you know, liberals having these ideas and conservatives having these ideas. He just doesn't have an explanation. Whereas what you're talking about there is the economics of it, you know, the way that the technology has changed and the profit incentives that creates, you know, for people to create one kind of news rather than another. So I mean, it's like, again, I just have to hope that like anybody watching that, you know, like who actually thinks about it later can see it's like, oh yeah, one of those explanations makes a lot more sense than the other one.
Yeah, and I mean, audience capture is a very real problem right now, especially for like independent content creators. And what does that mean? So if you start going down a certain path and attracting a certain type of audience, deviating from that path in any way leads to a pretty significant backlash. And I think a prime example of that is Jimmy Dore. I mean, almost 100% of Jimmy Dore's content is now anti-vax garbage. And it's because he knows the second he deviates from that, he's going to get backlash from the audience that he's cultivated. And so what I feel really good about is, look, there have been multiple times where I've gotten backlash from our audience, but in the end, I was proven right. Like Tulsi Gabbard is a prime example of that. I was like, yo, I know you guys think that Tulsi Gabbard is like this uber progressive, but like, here's the reality. People hated me for months and months and months. Like we lost a chunk of our audience because of that. But to me, you gotta know that you're in a filter bubble, and you have to like really go out of your way to make sure that you're consuming other content to really make an educated decision or form educated opinions about any political issue. By the way, I'm definitely vulnerable to this stuff too. I just gave you the example of Kyle Rittenhouse, and I'm embarrassed by it. Like, you know, the right wing is now coming after me because I did a long video where I corrected myself because that's the right thing to do. Of course. And some people were like, hey, I respect you for doing that. Others, I think rightly, are like, this information's been out there for a year. What happened? Like, you're a shitty person. You didn't want to know what the truth was. Now, of course, that's not true, but I was in a bubble. I was in this like, honestly, woke bubble that like just automatically painted a picture of what happened that night. And everything that I was consuming about Kyle Rittenhouse went along with that narrative. I had to go out of my way to like look at like videos from like completely independent sources to really form a more accurate opinion of what happened that night. So it is what it is.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I mean, look, I see. Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that all the time, like as it plays out in you know, left-wing media, you know, which I mean, I've seen it. I mean, the Tulsi example is kind of funny. I mean, like because I was you know, I think maybe shielded a little bit, you know, from all of that, you know, since most of what I was doing back then was on TMBS, where, you know, the Tulsi stuff was sort of a given, you know, but I actually did a really weird debate about that with Nico House. Where
I saw it. I thought you did great.
Well, thank
Nico
you.
House is, yeah.
I'll
save my opinion about it.
Well, it was just, I mean, look, I mean, you know, there's a lot of really creative claims being made on the fly, you know, on that end of that debate, you know, it's just like, okay. But yeah, no, I mean, like, I think also like I've seen it, you know, I've experienced it because, you know, I've certainly seen like the ways that like any kind of, you know, I mean, I'm not saying I was right about all of this stuff by any means, because like, I don't know, right? Like, you know, but like I've definitely seen just in the last year, I mean, places where like I will say something that like annoys the sort of like, I don't know, the you know, let's just go back to Jimmy, so I'm not starting a beef with anybody else, that the Jimmy Dore crowd or whatever, and I'll like go on some shows or whatever, and I'll see like 100 comments all the time about, fucking Ben Burgis said this, right? And then, or like conversely, right? Like I will say things that that piss off like a different faction within like left media. And like I'll go on the Majority Report or whatever, and I'll see like 100 people in comments, like being like, did you hear Ben Burgis said this, right? And it's like, man, it must be really easy to just like really, really easy, right? To just like pick a lane and just be like, look, I'm never going to say anything that's going to piss off people in this lane, and I'm just going to ride that, forever onward. Because I mean, like that would obviously be the most profitable thing to do.
It's definitely the most profitable, but also it's a dead end, right? I mean, and I think if you want an example of that dead end, it's like Dave Rubin. I mean, like Dave Rubin is the butt of every joke now. And it's because his grift was just so incredibly obvious. And, it's this line of work as I don't want to pretend like, what we do is so like way more difficult than anything else.
Sure.
However, while it might not be physically taxing, it's definitely already emotionally taxing at times. Like, and if you're doing it because you care about it, it's stressful. And like, sometimes I literally get like physically sick from it. So it's like the idea of doing this while also pretending to be something I'm not for profit. It's like, I'd rather do anything else.
You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive post-games on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.